On this Tuesday night, arrests in the disaster of Flight 752. The mystery of who Iran has detained as new video emerges of 2 Iranian missiles hitting the plane. Plus, Republicans on the defensive over Prime Minister Trudeau's remarks.
This is something that happens when you have conflict and war.
There's no blame here for America.
Canada's gender pay gap, how soon the disparity between men and women begins and by how much. Thousands on high alert and on the run. The volatile situation brewing in the Philippines and coming to Canada, where Harry and Meghan could end up living and working.
Global National with Dawna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin with developments in the downing of that passenger plane in Tehran. Iranian officials say a number of people have been arrested. It's unclear who they are or what role they played in firing the missiles that blew the Ukrainian Airlines flight from the sky, killing all 176 on board, including 57 Canadians. New security camera video has surfaced. Some may find it disturbing. It shows for the first time 2 Iranian missiles launched at the plane in the early hours of January 8th. After the first one hits, the plane keeps flying, and 30 seconds later, a second missile is launched. It also hits the plane. Footage from another security camera shows the devastating effects as it crashes to the ground. After 3 days of denials, Iran admitted one of its defense system operators mistook the plane for an American cruise missile. And today, President Rouhani said a special court will be established and that the whole world is watching. We will punish those involved, he says, and reassure people that such an incident will not be repeated. 2 investigators from Canada's Transportation Safety Board are now in Tehran and have visited the site. And in Washington, some American lawmakers are pushing back on what Prime Minister Justin Trudeau told me yesterday about who he thinks is to blame for the deaths of all those innocent people. We have complete coverage again tonight, beginning in Ukraine with our Europe Bureau Chief, Goomansingh.
Dawna, the director of Kyiv's Forensic Research Institute, says the bottom of the plane is still missing, along with the majority of the passenger seats. The front part wasn't spotted right away because it was covered by dirt. Exhausted physically and likely emotionally as well. They are the hands and eyes that families around the world are relying on. The 34 Ukrainian experts returning from Tehran are some of those who sifted dirt and hauled plane pieces. Alexandre Rouven says they examined some of the seats and saw traces of interference from foreign elements, cuts, fragments, and metal that should not have been there. In an interview provided by the Ukrainian government, he says the elements were determined to be from a type of rocket. They were shown to the Iranians who were watching the Ukrainians work, and a request was made to come back the following day. Arrived at the site Saturday, Iran announced the plane had been shot down by a missile. 176 people were killed. Iran is now trying to quell the anger at home and abroad. The president announced arrests were made, but no further information was shared. It's a very bitter accident, said Hassan Rouhani, and it's heavy for people to endure. He suggested a special court be set up for the case because the world would be watching, and they are.
We don't have the details at the moment of who was arrested, on what charge, and what's the evidence, but it's very clear for us that Iran basically wants to have the situation resolved.
As for which country will analyze the black boxes, that has not been resolved. Ukraine wants the work to be done in this country, but it's up to Iran. A number of countries have offered assistance. Canada and Ukraine continue to work closely. President Volodymyr Zelensky reaffirmed that partnership in a telephone call with the Prime Minister. So many people are grieving, and there are still many unanswered questions.
This is a shock. This is essentially out of the blue, something we never expected to see. And this story in general is another example of how the world is global in every way.
This country's president is preparing for an emotional day. Zelensky will once again meet with the families of the Ukrainian victims on Wednesday. Dawna?
Crystal Goomansingh in Ukraine tonight. Thanks. One woman's grief has captured the world's attention. She's believed to be the mother of one of the Iranian Canadians killed in the disaster last week. And in video posted to Twitter, you can hear her agony as she begs the Canadian government to help her. The journalist who posted that video said the family had been warned not to talk to journalists. Foreign Affairs Minister François-Philippe Champagne retweeted the video and responded saying these allegations are disturbing and we will look into them. Just hours before the plane was shot down, Iran had been firing missiles at bases in Iraq occupied by U.S. troops in retaliation for President Trump ordering the killing of a top Iranian general. Tensions were high and Iranian defenses were on high alert for American retaliation. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau told me yesterday in our exclusive interview that if tensions had not escalated, those on board the plane would be alive today. And that's getting pushback in Washington today from some lawmakers who don't think the U.S. bears any responsibility whatsoever. Jackson Proskow reports.
So what was the justification for the strike which killed General Soleimani?
In Washington, lawmakers began probing the unintended consequences of President Donald Trump's decision to take out Iranian General Qasem Soleimani, and whether that led directly to the downing of Ukraine International Airlines Flight 752.
And many of my colleagues here started claiming it was a response because of the United States escalation.
We have to ask, why was it worth turning the simmer up to a boil?
The White House has claimed an imminent threat led to the decision to target Soleimani, but has struggled to offer proof. As reports suggest, the president may have authorized the strike 7 months ago. Trump tweeted, "It doesn't really matter because of his horrible past."
If there were no tensions, if there was no escalation recently in the region, those Canadians would be right now home with their families.
Speaking to Global News on Monday, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau suggested Flight 752 was shot down because of the confrontation between the U.S. and Iran.
This is something that happens when you have conflict and war. Innocents bear the brunt of it.
There's no blame here for America.
Trump's Republican backers scoffed at that suggestion.
Iran shot down a commercial, innocent airliner. There's no doubt where the blame lies.
But there's no escaping the still unanswered questions about the targeted killing of Soleimani. How and why was the decision made? And why weren't allies like Canada given advance warning?
The greatest strength we have is dealing with our allies. And we have had a recent history of not consulting with our closest allies.
Lawmakers are increasingly uncomfortable with the administration's shifting explanations for the decision to kill Soleimani. A growing number of Republicans are expected to vote with Democrats in the Senate on a bill to limit Trump's ability to go to war with Iran. Jackson Proskow, Global News, Washington.
Another big concern about Iran is its efforts to build a nuclear weapon. The Iran nuclear deal signed in 2015 by a number of countries, including the U.S., put limits on Iran's ability to produce enriched uranium needed for nuclear weapons. But President Trump withdrew from that, and since then, Iran has gradually lifted all limits. Now, France, the UK, and Germany say they're not ready to abandon the deal. Today, they triggered a formal dispute mechanism in it. Redmond Shannon explains what it means and how Iran is responding.
Ever since Donald Trump withdrew from the 7-country Iran nuclear deal, Tuesday's move by Europe's 3 major powers was perhaps inevitable.
This will make America much safer.
When Washington reimposed sanctions on Iran, the Islamic Republic responded, reneging on the deal's restrictions on building nuclear weapons. The recent crisis that resulted in Iran shooting down Flight 752 has likely prompted this move by France, Germany and the UK to trigger the deal's dispute mechanism.
The aim of the dispute resolution mechanism is not to reimpose sanctions.
But really, the threat of new sanctions against Iran is what this move is all about. In November, protests over economic hardships saw a deadly crackdown. Iran's economy is strapped, and the Euro trio, or E3, is hoping the regime blinks.
The U.S. pulled out, thinking they would get a better deal later. The Europeans are trying to keep them in, saying that's the best deal they could get. Why not build on it instead of tearing it up?
But just as the E3 moved to save the deal, one of its leaders appeared to undermine it.
We've got to stop the Iranians acquiring a nuclear weapon. But if we're going to get rid of it, then we need a replacement.
That statement from British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is being praised by a Trump administration that's ready to strike against Iran if it ploughs on and builds a nuclear weapon.
They've been told by everyone that they had better get back to the negotiating table because there is no other option to prevent a confrontation that would be devastating to Iran, but also potentially to the region.
Iran criticised Tuesday's move, but said it is open to practical ideas that would keep the deal alive. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Now to some sad news in this country. A community in Winnipeg is in mourning after a high school student died of complications from the flu. School officials say 17-year-old Blaine Rupenthal was rushed to hospital last week after going into cardiac arrest. He died yesterday. Officials say he had type A influenza. It's a strain of flu that causes more severe illness than the other common type, influenza B. Public health officials say 560 hospitalizations due to the flu have been reported this season, and 10 people have died. Dangerously low temperatures are gripping much of Western Canada. The entire province of Alberta is under extreme cold warnings. And parts of Saskatchewan, Alberta, and BC saw temperatures dip below -30. With the wind chill, it feels more like -40 or 50 in some places. Environment Canada warns exposed skin could freeze in minutes. There is no relief in forecast until the weekend. And Edmonton is now on track to beat the 1997 record for consecutive days of -30-degree temperatures. Men versus women on pay day. Coming up, how soon the gender pay gap begins and then quickly widens. Plus, choking smoke, how wildfires are hurting athletes' hopes at the Australian Open. More Canadian firefighters are heading to Australia to battle the wildfires. The Foreign Affairs Minister, François-Philippe Champagne, announced Canada will deploy 69 additional fire management personnel to help with the devastating fires that continue to ravage Australia. Nearly 100 Canadian firefighters and other experts have been sent since the fires started in September. And smoke from those fires caused a Slovenian tennis player to suffer a coughing fit during her qualifying match for next week's Australian Open. She's not the only one feeling the effects. Canadian Eugenie Bouchard needed medical assistance. She did go on to win her first qualifying match, though. Air quality in Melbourne is among the worst in the world right now because of the deadly and destructive fires burning across Australia. Here at home, a new study is shedding some fresh light on this country's gender pay gap. It's well established Canadian women on average earn less than their male counterparts. Now researchers say they've discovered just how soon after graduation pay for women begins to fall behind. Abigail Beeman breaks down the numbers.
It's funny, at lunch today I was looking at a male college that came to my head and I'm like, you're probably making more money than I.
Women earning less than men is not new, but the extent of it, as shown in a new study, has many minding the gap.
It's unjust. It's very unjust. I mean, I'm shocked.
The report by the University of Ottawa and the Labour Market Information Council tracked earnings for all graduates of publicly funded post-secondary institutions in Canada using StatsCan data, from college certificates to PhDs, between 2010 and 2015. On average, it found women earned 12% less than men 1 year after graduation, $5,700. That widened to 25% less, $17,700 by year 5.
It's disappointing that they're making so much less.
I didn't know those stats were so high.
The difference between men and women cuts across all credentials and all fields of study. So there isn't one sort of credential, one example of a credential or field of study where women are earning more than men 5 years after graduation.
It remains one of the enduring questions, huge questions, economic and social, of our time.
The authors say a new StatsCan dataset allows it to be the most comprehensive study of its kind, aimed at giving people a better understanding of just how much they'd earn if they pursue a specific field and education path.
Information in the public domain in an accessible format that hasn't previously existed.
But there are still questions about why the gender gap exists. The study couldn't track number of hours worked, which affects pay, nor someone's specific job. Someone who graduated in one field may work in another. And it's not always easy to talk about.
That would be an awkward question.
But Marie Bodden says she's going to try, confronting the potentially higher-earning staff member at her school.
It's time for us to get the right pay. After that, today, I'm going to go to him and ask him.
Abigail Beeman, Global News, Ottawa.
Ahead, an entire island, a danger zone in the Philippines because of a volcano.
You're watching Global National.
This is one of the rescue efforts underway after 3 separate avalanches tore through remote villages in Pakistan-controlled Kashmir. At least 55 people were killed, more than a dozen others are missing. Heavy rain and snow triggered the powerful avalanches, which leveled homes and buried roads. A state of emergency has been declared in 7 districts, and the Pakistani army has been called in to help in the search and recovery efforts. Steam and red-hot lava is spewing from a volcano in the Philippines tonight, covering nearby villages in thick ash, and there's fear what could happen next. This is time-lapse video of the Taal volcano. It had been dormant for 43 years before suddenly rumbling back to life on Sunday. Taal is on an island in the middle of a freshwater lake about 60 kilometers south of Manila. The entire island has long been designated a danger zone. Right now, about 25,000 people are in shelters or on the run because experts predict an explosive eruption could happen at any time. Mike Armstrong reports.
It would be striking and beautiful if it weren't deadly and dangerous. Tuesday, some villagers returned to the island for the first time since the Taal volcano woke up. They went to save what they could. A photographer also made the trip. The man who took these pictures says he was told by a villager that what Taal gave them, it has now taken back. On the mainland, communities covered in ash, almost like a snowfall. Cleaning up will take weeks, but it may also be interrupted. What Taal did Sunday was only the beginning, mostly steam and ash. Next could be a full eruption. Government volcanologists said Tuesday what we're seeing on the surface is only part of the story. What's going on underground is more important. They say there are literally hundreds of small tremors happening and fissures growing in the ground in the area. What it means is likely that magma is rising towards the surface and pressure is building. Officials say a hazardous, explosive eruption is possible within hours to days. More than 30,000 people are now in shelters, with tens of thousands more being urged to leave their homes. A whole region has been shut down, anything within a radius of 14 kilometers around Taal. There are no customers, this man says. We have no source of income. That is our biggest problem. Now, the Taal volcano's last eruption was in 1977, but its worst on record was way back in 1911. It lasted 3 days. 1,300 people were killed. The threat level right now is officially a 4 on 5. A 5 is a full eruption. If that happens, authorities say they'll suggest people in an even wider area get out. Mike Armstrong, Global News.
In China, at least 6 people are dead and more than a dozen injured after a sinkhole swallowed a bus full of passengers. Surveillance video of the incident shows an explosion right after the vehicle falls in. 10 people are missing. Several pedestrians fell into the sinkhole as it widened. China has seen an increase in sinkholes in recent years. They're often blamed on construction projects. Next, how Harry and Meghan could approach their relocation to Canada. Prince William got straight back to work today after the summit with his grandmother, father, and brother Harry to sort out plans for Meghan and Harry to withdraw as full-time royals. William stepped in for the Queen at an investiture ceremony, and he used British Sign Language to congratulate a deaf interpreter who has translated British TV for decades. The man was praised as an example of how profoundly deaf people can have an impact on their community. The news that's making headlines, though, is still the future of Harry and Meghan. Their apparent plans to move part-time to Canada is raising all kinds of questions about where they'll live and where they might work. And as Robin Gill reports, whether Canadian taxpayers will be paying any of their bills.
There is much ado about where Meghan and Harry shall settle in Canada. Will it be Victoria, where Meghan has been holed up since she and hubby blindsided the Queen?
For them, I'm sure that it is a breath of fresh air.
Or Toronto, where the Prince wooed his bride?
Canada's a great decision, better than the U.S.
Or Sussex, New Brunswick, where this local paper suggests it's apropos the Sussexes settle in their midst. Whatever the case, the Duke and Duchess plan to split their time between Canada and the UK. This immigration lawyer has offered up his services to the royal couple, pro bono. Here's the letter to prove it. Under Canadian law, the two can stay here as visitors for up to 6 months.
Immigration should waive them right through. There's no concerns of overstay visas. They have the financial resources to be a tourist here. They don't need to work, and if they want to work, they can get a work permit. So what border services officer is going to bet a career on saying no to the royals?
The royals indeed have a large bank account. The Duke inherited loads from his mother and great-grandmother. The Duchess had an acting career. Together, they're worth about 39 million Canadian. So what will they do?
They're not poor. They're not looking to do, flogging Kellogg's cornflakes, that sort of thing.
BC's premier thinks the royals should look for work in his fair province.
I'm sure I could find something for Harry to do. And the film industry is booming in British Columbia, so I'm sure Meghan could get on with one of the great, maybe Riverdale, who knows.
Technically, as royals, they're internationally protected persons, so the RCMP has a duty to pay for their security costs when they spend time among us Canucks.
No, I don't want to pay for it.
Like it or not, Harry, Meghan, and baby Archie makes 3. The royals are putting roots here in Canada. Robin Gill, Global News, Vancouver.
And that is Global National for this Tuesday. I'm Dawna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada showcases some of the new stamps released by Canada Post. The series is called From Far and Wide, and it features stunning views from across the country. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.